Happy Tuesday. Thank you for joining us today. I am so excited about this panel. I have James and Adam here with me to talk about picking the best B2B data provider for your needs. Let me share my slides in here. So today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. And our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. We have 35K plus members, and with that number of people helping you, I am sure no questions will be left unanswered and no problems will be left unsolved. And we do that through live sessions like this amazing one that you are about to experience. We have a robust online forum, and we have quarterly summits. And we are getting back to in-person events, which is very, very exciting. If you're not already part of the MSP crew, you will be invited to join right after this event. And as I said, we have quarterly summits, and we just launched the Mega Scope for January 24th to 26th in 2023. We are organizing more than 20 content tracks, 3,000 plus modern sales pros in attendance, more than 50 high caliber speakers. You can hear from leaders from Drift, Lean Data, Stage 2 Capital, plus so much more. Don't miss out next year. I am going to put a link right now in the chat for you audience to sign up. But that's enough about other events. Let's focus on how to get the most out of this one. So let's review some housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, so you will be able to access the recording right after the event in the Modern Sales Pros previous events page. And I will also send a follow-up email to everyone in here with the link for you to just watch the recording. And I was talking with the panelists backstage, especially Adam. He told me he loves answering questions. So please go in the chat and in the Q&A panel on your right-hand side, answer them all the questions that you have about B2B data because they are the experts. And the great thing about MSP is that we do not work alone. We have partners, and today sponsoring this event, we have SalesIntel. I have James Lamberti here. He's the CMO at SalesIntel, and he will introduce himself, tell us a little bit about SalesIntel, introduce our panelists, and then audience, you are in for a treat. This panel will be amazing. So James, you can take it from here. I'll be back at the end for some closing notes.
Great. Thank you, Eduardo. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As Eduardo mentioned, my name is James Lamberti. I'm the CMO here at SalesIntel. Recently, about 100 days in, spent time in enterprise selling, customer success, and more recently, marketing. So I've sort of seen the evolution of B2B intelligence and its applications in market. And I'm joined by someone who with a similar worldview of B2B intelligence data. Adam, thank you for joining us. Thanks to Salesvue for what you're doing to innovate in the sales enablement, sales cadence world. And introduce yourself and a little bit about Salesvue.
Yeah, appreciate it. So Adam Thomas, Vice President of Sales here at Salesvue. I've been with the company for a couple of years now. Been in the sales tech, MarTech space for several years. Salesvue, we're in the sales engagement cadence space specifically, and we'll talk about this in a bit. We're a Salesforce native application. So for those of you that are using Salesforce, those are the people that we really can help out. So appreciate it, James.
Cool. So, everyone, we'll spend about 30, 35 minutes, maybe a little more, just kind of, having the fireside chat here about the increasing array of B2B intelligence providers and, really getting to the heart and the truth of what's underneath these providers, right? Many times you'll ask these questions and you'll land with SalesIntel as being the best choice. Other times you won't. And that's, I think, is part of how we operate within the modern sales pro community. We're pretty sincere about that. But I know as someone who's been in this market for a long time, how to interrogate these solutions is getting a little more challenging. And so I hope today you walk away with, good, practical, applicable knowledge of the 5 questions you should ask and the answers you should expect. Adam is here because he has gone through this in both for himself and for Salesvue, but also on behalf of a lot of customers who do this routinely, right, as they're using his sales engagement and sales cadence technology. So those 5 questions, just starting off here, we have 5. Number 1, can you define and size your ideal customer profiles? You might call it your relevant market, your sales addressable market. I think you get the point, right? It's about, can you define and size the ICP? That is foundational to what these business intelligence capabilities need to be able to help you do, right? Second question, what data do you need to go to market effectively? And does your provider of consideration have it? Why do you need certain data? What utility does it have, right? Can you actually leverage and query the platform effectively to filter and pull out what you need directly from the application, right? Question number 4 is, is the intelligence accurate and actionable? This may be the hardest, the one that is often most debated in terms of how you go about doing it. I spent a long time in market research, selling research, being a customer service. So there's a lot of good tips and tricks we'll share you about how it is you interrogate the data and get to a good answer, right, around quality and accuracy. And then finally, does this activate easily where you need it? A great example of that is what Salesvue does, which is why I wanted Adam to join us. So we'll go through kind of an example in his world using, Salesvue, SalesIntel, Salesforce, right? Which is a great example. And I think that'll be a really good way to end it. So starting off with the first question, right? And every one of these will sort of walk through, a little conversation, and then I'll pause, and at times I'll toss the baton to Adam. But question number 1, right? Can you define and size your ICB? And the first hint here, the first key thing to think about is not just about contact data. A lot of times, smaller companies, individual sales teams don't fully grasp all the other data assets that are out there, right? So in order to actually define and size your IPC, the more important dimensions are not the contact data, it is the firmographic data, right? That you have the coverage of all the accounts. So this is an account specific view you want to take, the technographics around it. So, I'm going to have Adam go through an example in his world of how he does it. But those two, firmographics and technographics, are the foundation. They're going to be the way that you get to the market size, right, at an account level, and a way to describe it and narrow it to an ICP that makes sense for what you can address today. You then would layer on the titles and personas, and there's reasons for that when we answer question number 2. Multiply at times your average contract value, and you will get to a really tight definition of your ICP that can live and operationalize in your environment. So Adam, love for you to walk through your own ICP, evaluation as an example of what you've done and how you've done it.
Yeah, if you look at the way that we're going to market, one of our primary verticals is in the financial services space. We work with all the verticals, but that's a spot where we've had a lot of success. And so for me, it's not just a matter of having millions of contacts in a database. I've played that game before. I've used several vendors. Having just a very large contact list where you look at the total number of contacts is relatively pointless, at least in my experience. So for me, it's really about how many of the perfect personas can I find? And for us, being a Salesforce native application, the technographics is vital, because if they don't use Salesforce, they're not a prospect for us. Additionally, it's nice to know if they're already using a competing cadence or sequence solution. So that gives us some more intelligence. So we layer in that into the messaging so we have more effective outbound. Also, sales enablement platforms that are content management systems like a Seismic, HighSpot, Showpad, understanding if those are invested in those companies as well. That helps because we pair nicely with those other platforms too. So again, it gets to the messaging. And then being able to find the right people that are going to buy Salesvue, your sales leadership, your execs, ops, enablement, getting that decision maker list of 39,805. That's the number that matters. It's not just the total number of people in the system. And then I need to know that the data is going to be right. So that's how we went through it, James.
Yeah. No, and I think what's so powerful about this is like, again, you're an innovative kind of growth company, right? So I think a lot of folks stumble, even large companies launching a new feature, launching a new product, going to a new geography, right? Going through this exercise and having the definition of the ICP live in your CRM and manifest in the cadence, the outbound cadence, and manifest in my world, I'll explain in a minute, like how you market, but it becomes a manageable, a manageable and focusing exercise, right? I mean, you look at your numbers here, right? You've got, call it 150,000 companies. That sounds like a lot, but you start to look at the number of contacts where you have a decision maker, multiply that times a $75,000 ACV, and you can quickly see, like, I've narrowly defined that market, and I still have plenty of addressable market. I have plenty to go after, and I have really good decision maker data that will take a long time, right, for me to cycle through. So I think it's something that I am, I guess, pretty shocked that how rarely I've seen marketing teams, even as you scale companies, be really thoughtfully do this and arm their operations from the beginning. So that moves to question number 2, which I'll take a shot at kind of going through this one, right? As the marketing guy. But what data do you actually need to go to market effectively? Now you've defined that ICP as a launch pad, if you will, right? How do you then leverage all this data to actually activate or make your marketing efforts and your sales efforts efficient and effective? Build the pipeline, right? And the hint here is intent is vital. Because you now understand who's in market now. So one concept that I think we've all talked about is, am I, creating demand or creating awareness if you're in a category where the demand is there, or am I trying to harvest that demand? So create versus harvest is a very different behavior from a marketing and sales motion. So layering on top of that ICP definition that Adam took you through, intent data, along with things like, in our cases, call it visitor intel, but it's website tracking, right? Who just came to my website and I light them up as another form of intent, right? This data as a way to distinguish in your go-to-market between building or creating awareness and demand versus harvesting demand is vital. So in the case of our partnership with Salesvue, that intent data flows in on our ICP. We immediately signal to our BDRs and AEs in their outbound motion who these companies are, what signal we're seeing, right? We know which persona it is that they've got a contact around, and the efficiency, right, of that outbound, if you look at that third box, is radically better. And you also have a way to right size your team, right? A lot of times as we go into planning 2023, you're thinking about capacity. An awesome way to think about capacity planning is to use this data, this ICP definition, combined with intent. At any one time, how long am I in market? I then have an equation by which I can actually thoughtfully plan capacity, because I really should be triggering my outbound and my sales activity, in mid-bottom funnel, letting marketing handle account targeting, right? And so that's another area. If you look at the second box, account targeting, I kind of did this out of order, but we now, with our own data, with SalesIntel, we do this, but with any provider, you should be thinking this way, right? How much marketing activity am I seeing? How many email opens, clicks, white paper downloads? What about my account fit? Is that account that I'm seeing in my ICP layer on intent? All of that can actually drive very focused, targeted, paid advertising, which can have a 3x improvement in inbound efficiency. And so I think, Adam, hopefully this is all like making sense to people, but this question, right, about what data do you need to go to market effectively is vital, and make sure you properly assess that, and making sure that there are comprehensive data sets that can all work together and live in the systems for you to even activate your ICP. I don't know, Adam, if you have anything to add before we move on, or anything to share about kind of your process here.
No, I mean, the idea of having the intent, the technographics, and the right data was really what brought me to SalesIntel. So
yeah,
spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and I think you also, and when we talked about this, there's a couple of the areas that I think that you mentioned, right, as we were having this conversation leading up to the webinar today. You mentioned technographic, you mentioned intent. Would love to get your perspective, especially as an engagement and cadence innovator, mobile phone, research on demand, and how it is that you're using those types of capabilities and what they really are.
Yeah. So we've talked about the technographic and the intent. Why don't I touch on the research on demand a bit then? I think they're all valuable. They're all vital. So what I've found is in using legacy data providers historically is I get data and the information is wrong or they're at the wrong company and we need to go out and find accurate data. And that's what really excited me about SalesIntel is they actually have a team of almost 2,000 researchers that will go out and do that work to validate the data. And that matters. Like, so later on, we'll show a screenshot, but I've got the ability because us with SalesIntel collectively creates a true single source of truth inside of Salesforce. I have the ability to ask their team to go out and confirm the contact data when I figure out somebody's maybe no longer there or the data isn't accurate. I can activate them to go out and do the research for me. And that, because we're all using Salesforce as that single point of connection, will in turn update my CRM and keep that accurate as we move forward through the engagement with these prospects or clients. I've never seen anything else do that. I've always had to manually manage that. So that's been really cool, very valuable. They've got the ability to go do the work and then automatically enroll those into my cadences seamlessly. It's very slick. And then obviously the right data, just my prior vendor, I had a 30 some odd % bounce rate because just data wasn't right. And so I value the accuracy over the quantity at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think again, this is just the transparency that I think is important, especially as we move into a new area. I mean, there's far more scaled capabilities from auto dialers and cadence tools, right? It's getting more challenging, right? So in that environment, you just have to recognize like no provider, not us, not anybody's gonna comprehensively cover the ICP. The difference is what do you do about it, right? And I think, Adam, what you're pointing out is when you see the gap or when you see a quality issue, there's a scaled feature that solves for it, that provides a solution as opposed to just letting you suffer, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so
James, that right there, you hit the nail on the head. It's I'm given a database of people and I need to trust that it works. And I don't know that the data is wrong until I get an email bounce and my domain starts to suffer. With SalesIntel, I see, hey, this person's not human verified. Go verify it. Like that transparency is very valuable as you're, in these efforts.
Yeah, cool. So at this point, I want to kind of, again, this is something I would probe, I would ask, right? This next kind of data collection primer discussion, right? And there are, I would call there's 4 different sort of data collection, data hygiene methodologies that are out there, and you should understand what they all are and what they mean, right? And they have different implications on the data. Well, so Adam did a pretty thorough job of explaining human verified. It is literally that, right? A human being verified it, including actively reaching out on the data point and getting the response or signal expected, right? To know that it was actually valid. And that human verification process in our case, right, is massively scaled at this point, right? We've got over 10 million human verified decision makers, right? About 6 million in the US market. So in that case, it is about quality and focus, right? 95% accurate SLAs. The other approach, when it comes to signal-based or machine-based collections, there are 2 different types of methodologies. On the upper right, you've got proprietary applications and permissioning, right? So will have applications that are first-party proprietary applications, permissioned appropriately, right, to help with that account and or contact data. That is always going to be a much higher quality machine or signal source data set than third-party scraped. And when we say third-party, that's all be just transparent what we're talking about. It's mostly LinkedIn is getting scraped, right? And so the extent to which you can see the data on LinkedIn already, that's the data that's there. And so there's lots of issues with scraping from a coverage, from a quality perspective, from a completeness perspective. It doesn't do much for account data at all, right? In terms of getting a comprehensive view of account data. And so just, proceed with caution. You're going to get giant numbers. You're going to get extremely poor quality. And then the fourth aspect, which you should ask about, is re-verification and change management. How often are these data sets polished, right? Because there is a decay rate, right? So ask the question, what is the re-verification process? What are the SLAs and contractual obligations around maintaining a certain level or quantity that was there when you first populated your CRM? Cool. I didn't know all that when I joined 100 days ago. It was really helpful for me to really understand that. And the other thing I'll mention here is, are you creating demand or harvesting demand? So I already covered this, but this concept really for me, from a marketing perspective, has to do with intent, right? Intent is the signal at which you're harvesting demand, right? This is going to impact your paid search, your mid-funnel activity, and it certainly informs your outbound, right? Because those folks are in market. So let's move on to question number 3. Can you query the platform to find what you need, right? And this is where, Adam, you probably did this sort of exercise and can explain kind of how you went about it. But this really gets down to how do you make comparisons in the data sets, and then also learn about the utility or the functionality of the software itself, right? And I think it's real important here on the hint side not to cherry pick. You can always find individual contexts, or you can always find something wrong, right? Quality is extremely challenging. You can always find an individual data point. Look at an individual person on LinkedIn that's not in anybody's data set. But what you need to really think about is a scaled way to test this stuff. And so when you think about human verification, right, this is about querying the data in a way that allows you to transparently see what's human verified versus what's not, and be able to then confidently execute against that with the 95% accuracy backed by SLAs. Does the platform have that capability, right? Machine verified will often have varying levels of quality, and quality can be determined is as bad as it's not even a valid email address, or it's just incomplete data on the record, right? So some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's missing, right? And so thinking about machine verified, it's like the way we approach it is email verified. We want to make sure if it's not in our human verified data set, but you need quantity, rather than just giving you 30% bounce rate data, our mentality is to give you email verified contacts. They may or may not be complete in other data sets, but you can count on the email being 95% accurate. This protects against some of the downside Adam was describing. And then beware of empty contacts and guessed data, right? There's literally guessing going on all the time, right? They literally just take first name, last name, at company name, dot whatever, and that's going to pollute your systems over time if you kind of rely on that technique. So ask about that. And then finally, we'll get into the next point here, but this ICP side by side in a scaled trial, I'll go through that concept in a moment when I talk about, is the intel accurate and actionable? But what I want to do is really have Adam double click briefly for us on this notion of what he and I call actionable data, which is all about this intersection of quality versus quantity and what really you need to be actionable for your business. So Adam, you want to share a few thoughts on that and kind of your mentality, your approach as you've gone through the selection of your provider?
Yeah, the whole point of it being action, to me, the whole point of it is that I can trust that if I'm going to spend my time and energy and my team's effort, that we are going after a person. And we have spent a lot of time, a person with accurate contact information, and the ability to know that they're in market, the data is correct, that if we put them into a campaign or a cadence, we're not going to get a bunch of bounces. We spent a lot of time dealing with that over the last, call it, year and a half of that data. And we've seen just what I've seen from customers that are now clients of both ours and SalesIntel's, that if you spin up your outbound, go to market strategy around incomplete data and bounce data, you're just going to end up hurting your company's domain reputation. You're going to waste time. It's just not, unless you're targeting the right person, it's not worth it. So for me, it's all about the quality.
Yeah. And actionable data from a perspective, from a sales engagement and cadence tool perspective, is about the contact data, right? And like, it's really risky to have low quality data in that dimension on the contact side.
Right.
For the marketing team, when they're doing, scaled targeting, I'm really talking about using the ICP account data. And yes, I'll use contacts data as well there, integrate it with the native targeting systems of, LinkedIn or Meta or Google, whatever I'm using. So there are different requirements or different definitions of actionable data depending on who in the go-to-market team is leveraging it, right? So I think in Adam's case, when you're talking about the contact data and what his company is focused on, you've got his perspective. From a marketing perspective, in partnership with a DSP or just using the native targeting, you can have a different level of data. This is why I think actionable data is an important concept to think about across your entire go-to-market team, and making sure that the provider you choose is transparently showing you what level of quality you're dealing with, so that as you're using it in these different ways, you get the goodness of it, but you don't get the badness that Adam described.
Hey, James, there's also a question from Dan around the data maintenance aspect of it, which I think ties in nicely with the actionable data. In a couple of slides, we're actually going to show how Salesvue and SalesIntel work on that together in terms of when data changes after they're first enrolled into a cadence or an outbound. So Dan, we'll definitely be touching on that here shortly, but great question.
Yeah, that's great. And I should have mentioned at the outset, we'll make sure we're seeing all the questions. So Dan, we'll come back to your question here. So number 4, this is all about accuracy and actionability, right? And again, I kind of wanted Adam and I to talk about that first notion of actionable data, because when you test the accuracy and actionability, the test should be use case driven, essentially, right? Am I looking to drive outbound activity through my cadence and sales engagement tool to decision makers, or do I want to do scaled paid advertising in some way? And the key thing for me is the side-by-side test to truly know, right? You should demand a test drive of whoever it is that you're considering. It's your ICP, and it's about the ICP, right? Define that ICP in the way I described. Look at deliverability, right? Execute on a random sample of n equals 200 or 300. Don't allow any vendor to cherry pick. Look how good my data is. Here's a bunch. They've set up the demo to win, right? Truly interrogate the data, and you'll be surprised at what you'll learn, right? Connectability is another one when it comes to phone, right? So you've got deliverability of email, connectability of mobiles, and then evaluate the support, right? Oftentimes the trial process is a good indicator of what to expect post-sale, and there's a big difference in vendors pre-post sale. So Adam, you had some really cool comments here, and actually this hits a little bit on sort of Dan's question. So we'll answer a little bit here, but talk a little bit about your perspective on quality management, right? Once you've made the selection, and how it is that you expect and you're seeing quality management take place.
Yeah, and this is personal to me, because the fact that we are a native application, the ability to keep the data clean in my sales process is absolutely vital. I think James will agree. Everybody from SalesIntel will agree. Like, even though the data may be accurate when you import it into Salesforce, people change jobs, and that data can change. And so one of the most basic use cases I have when I use SalesIntel in my day-to-day is when I go to a contact and I see their information, I check SalesIntel's information compared to my Salesforce contact data. I think everyone on this call can understand, especially anyone that's used the CRM before, understands like that data gets stale quick. So for me, it's important to say, oh, this person now has an updated phone number or an updated email address. And within one click inside of SalesIntel in Salesvue, I can update my CRM contact record. To me, that's absolutely invaluable. I've never had that capability in the decade and a half I've used different data providers. It's extremely useful. So that's where, again, that single source of truth. It's not just like SalesIntel is definitely focused on the data quality. From us, when you're in a sales process, we still care about that data quality. Like we're leveraging the same records, we're leveraging the same contact data, and we have the ability to keep it updated as we use it and go through our sales process. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. And I think the other part of this that I'll add on there is that, gaps will always exist, right? As you explore one part of the market and you find that you see another X number of companies because you've hired a new salesperson, you see intent signals from a part of the market you didn't expect maybe, and you want to trial there, those gaps can be filled, right? I mean, there'll be some context there, but you'll be missing it. And the point is, like, you have the ability, because because of the research and demand team essentially, and the focus of the ICP, you now have the ability to go and kind of laser guided strike the contacts you need, right? Because you see that company is a good fit, you're seeing intent signals. So that continuous gap, contact and account gap, filling capability is really important to quality management and to the health of the CRM and your pipeline. Very cool. This is a concept we talked about, Adam, like the high cost of, we called it the high cost of low quality. Like you referenced a couple times, 30%, like just, I think, talk a little bit about some of the ROI impact of that, from your perspective, and how inefficient it can create.
Right. I mean, so if you think about the fact that you're leveraging a third of your team's time not connecting with somebody, to me, that's just not where you want your time, your team to spend their time. And obviously we've talked about like domain reputation and all the technical stuff that I think is going to continue to become a bigger and bigger topic. But having our team, having teams going after ghosts essentially that don't exist or have the wrong information, it's just not where we should be spending our time. So if I can get 25% higher deliverability, 25% more connections with those prospects, it's invaluable for us. So,
yeah, and I think the other part of the high cost of low quality is just the low quality data creates debt. It's like tech debt, right? It creates cost in the API, signals back and forth between the various platforms you're using. So there's a cost there from a revenue operations perspective that's actually quite significant. And the way people often, I think, get this wrong, frankly, is if you're dealing with a 30% inaccuracy rate, then literally, as Adam described, 1/3 of your time is completely wasted. And you've got to then get 2 other good contacts to make up for it. So now, as opposed to just having a smaller group of high quality contacts and the ability to go fill those gaps, right? And I think the mentality in the industry of focus and quality is just orders of magnitude more efficient. I mean, think about what we just described, right? If I've got, 3 hours to spend and one of them's wasted, I have to spend 2 hours, I have to spend 1 hour to make up for it. And then I have 1 hour to actually, make progress. So James, I would really, yeah.
I mean, there's a really technical or a really specific example too, in terms of this cost that you're getting at. There's a mutual customer of ours that both Salesvue and SalesIntel have brought into the fold in the last few months. And I can give you a very concrete example of what happened to them. They were scrubbing data from a legacy provider, and they were using email as a primary means of outbound. Over the first, I can't remember the exact months, 3-6 months that they were doing these outbounding efforts, 50,000 emails were sent, 4 replies. Their domain was basically blacklisted. They had to spend tens of thousands of dollars with a consultant to try to rebuild their domain health. And they lost 6 months of velocity going to market as a startup. So their Series A, not getting any responses. The leadership has now turned over from an executive leadership all in part because they had no success in 6 months because they were relying on stale data and lazy efforts of outbounding. And it's just that data, had that been clean, that leadership would probably still be there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great story, and it happens a lot more than people understand. And a lot of times the reason for turnover like that is an undiagnosed issue like this. It just goes undiagnosed, right, as to why.
They had no
Right?
clue.
I've got all my activity numbers are up. Look at everything I'm doing. It's like, well, you don't have enough ad dollars. It's spread too thin because you haven't defined the ICP and loaded up accurate account data, right? You're not using intent signals to better target that and efficiently track, harvest demand, and so on and so forth. So it's a really, we're going to be working on this concept. Adam, I'll have you and a couple others join us the next time we do this to really diagnose in financial terms the high cost of low quality. It's one of the things we'll talk about at one of the upcoming events we have with Modern Sales Pro community. Very cool. So last number one is like, does it activate easily where you need it most? So look, like we all have our stacks, right? Everyone's got their, the approach I say is like, be your best stack. You should be the stack you want to be. You shouldn't feel like you're trapped into any one set of technologies, right? And so obviously for sales outreach, like at the top of this list for us is Salesvue. And I want to let, Adam, in appreciation for you just spending time with everybody, take us through your stack, right? And how you activate this data in partnership with Salesforce, with us, and of course, for yourself, as well as your customers.
Yeah. So I, again, as a Salesforce native application, obviously we use Salesforce as our CRM. I've used several of the other cadence sequence engines that you saw on the prior slide. For us, in terms of my stack, I use Sales Navigator, SalesIntel. I also have access into Seismic and HighSpot. What I'm able to do with Salesvue and with SalesIntel is have a true single source. So if I log into my CRM, I have my outbound engine, which is Salesvue. All of my SalesIntel contact information is also imported into Salesforce, which then goes directly into a cadence. So what I talked about earlier, Dan, your question, we actually teed this up perfectly, is not only is it about getting the contacts or the right accounts into a Salesvue plan or cadence, it's about keeping it clean as you go through the process. So you can see here, because I'm working off of, again, that single record, you see that green line there. That's a new phone number that I did not have access to when I loaded this person into a plan just maybe a week ago. And what this allows me to do is to keep the hygiene up of my contacts as I go through a Salesvue plan. So to me, I've never had that capability. And that's usually one of the downsides of using these old contact data in your CRM, is that it just gets stale. And then again, you start dealing with that high bounce rate again and that inaccurate data. So that's just a really practical use case I wanted to share with you guys today. So yeah, happy to answer any questions on that as well.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll get some. Let's see. So really at this point, 38 minutes in, we promised you 35 to 40 minutes. We're at 38. Happy to take any questions. I want to make sure that as we do that and we wrap up, there is a buyer's guide, right? That we've written up. It explains all of these concepts. It certainly lands at the end on making the case for SalesIntel in the midst of all these questions, but you're going to ask some of these questions. You're not always going to land with us, right? And which is fine. But I think that authentically there's value in this buyer's guide. I think it's sorely missing in the market. And I really encourage you to read it, understand how data is collected, understand what quality means. We're going to keep building it out. We'll probably build it out for different verticals, including finance, because every ICP is different. But I think it's going to be a really great primer for the industry. And because you all joined us here today, we will share a copy with you. And then, of course, Adam, before we take questions, I think you and I would love to talk to people if they want.
Yeah, we'd be happy. We've been working together. We just announced today our formal partnership with our two organizations, and we are definitely excited to show the joint value of both systems together for obviously all of you using Salesforce, because you would be the appropriate audience for that. So feel free to click and we would be happy to walk you through a custom conversation and demo.
Yeah. And if it's hard to click through the screen right now, we'll make sure, again, we'll follow up. You'll be able to connect with us if you want directly through the MSP team and Eduardo. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And let's go to see if there's any questions. I know there's a couple I see, but Eduardo, do you want to join us here and make sure we handle any of the outstanding questions if there are any?
Hey, that was a fantastic presentation. So we have some questions in here. Let me open up. Colin is asking, Adam, do you find that you have enough contacts to reach, even when using human verified data, to keep your sales process rolling?
I certainly do, but I also will throw out there, I mean, there are times that I run into people that are not human verified that are the perfect contact that I want to reach out to. So in that case, I utilize the research on demand. I don't think it's a bad thing that they give me the opportunity to go out and get that data verified. And usually that turnaround, I don't know what the SLA they guarantee is, but usually it's a few hours for a contact. And then there's been times too where, like I think James mentioned it, if we have a hyper targeted focus where I'll give their team a list of 50 to 100 people that I want to have verified. And they're quick about it. So no, I've had no issue. I definitely can't get through everybody that I have. So that is not the problem.
I think it's a great question that you asked. So, to me, this gets to the heart of it. Like we're not going to have your entire ICP. Nobody is. But as Adam described, if you define it tightly and then you see where the gap is, and you also balance out, like part of the question there is like, well, how many BDRs do you have, right? Can you afford 5 or can you afford 500, right? So I think the scale at which you're operating and the size of your ICP has a lot to do with how many human verified contacts you need. But I can't emphasize enough that when you have gaps, you can fill them, right? And our SLA is 24 hours. We usually fill it, on average, we fill it within 4. And it's worked in batches of, I think it's 100, maybe 200. I forget the exact number. But so, this is part of scoping the agreement and arrangement in the right way, because that's what Adam did. He knows his ICP, he knows the capacity of his team, he scoped things appropriately, and he's not going to run out because that's how we operate.
Awesome, that makes a lot of sense. Rob is asking, how often should a company reveal if their data provider is the correct fit?
How often should they review?
Yeah, I guess like if they reevaluate the company. Yeah. Is there a number? Is it like if things are going sideways?
I think you should always be at a minimum. I would recommend annually as a starting point. You'll eventually lock into someone that you really trust, and then maybe you can think about a multi-year deal for lots of reasons. The biggest issue that I think is out there on this front is not switching costs are high, right? Everyone knows that. And so the other part of evaluating, and this was on a slide earlier, Eduardo, and I forgot to mention it, but part of what you have to ask is, depending on who I choose or if I decide to switch, is there a process? Is there experience in making sure that you can switch out one provider for another without losing any operational rigor, capacity, scale, right? And so I can tell you right now, because we've been chasing a much bigger entity in market, we all know who that is, we've gotten extremely good at diagnosing the size of your database, pairing that up, seeing what percentage of coverage we have today, figuring out if there's any gaps, how to fill that, we will fill them, and doing that all before you have to switch over. So I just want to kind of share that. It wasn't a direct question you answered, but I think it's a real important thing for you all to know that is a capability that's there. And Adam went through that, right? Do you want to add to that at all, Adam? Or
I sort of have a different. I mean, I'm always evaluating, right? Like we're always making sure that the quality is there. It is definitely. I mean, there is the change management piece of it. I think where SalesIntel was really helpful, I thought, was on the client success side of it, on the customer support. So I would evaluate that support you're getting, because no system is perfect. But if there's a team that actually can help solve the problems that you need, whether it's through the research on demand or just understanding searches, to me, it's all about the client support. So that was a huge thing for me, and that continues to be very valuable.
And I will say, the larger you are as a company, the more likely you are to waterfall several players. I think there's another, this is not such an expensive endeavor, these providers, certainly not us, that you can't waterfall and have, if you're a large enough company, you might have multiple providers. For example, a lot of companies put us at the top of the waterfall for human verified and use ROD to like fill ABM gaps, but also have a secondary provider. So that's another option to think about. You're not always stuck with one provider if your budgets allow it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Always good to have like a plan B or something to support in case something doesn't work with your main provider, right? All right, I don't see any other questions here, audience. You still have a minute. While I say things here, let me go back to the offer. If you want to reach that offer that we have on the slide right now, click on the sponsor booth at the top of this page. This link will be right there available for you, and you can go and check. So let's say thank you. I don't see any other questions coming. So let's wrap things up in here. Audience, thank you so much for joining us today. We love having you here. You are the best part of MSP. Let's also say thank you to our wonderful Sales Intel. They're doing amazing stuff. You have a button at the top of this page to request a demo with them. You can also go and check their sponsor booth so you can see the offer in there. And thank you, James and Adam, for the amazing key takeaways. And all this presentation was fantastic. While the speakers and I hang out backstage, the MSP team will make sure that the recording is available on our website pretty soon, and you also will receive a follow-up email from me. Adam, James, do you want to say anything else for the audience?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adam.
Appreciate the time. Thanks for the invite. So.
Awesome. So audience, we will see you later. Have a great rest of your week. Speakers, we can go hang out backstage and talk a little bit more about data. I'll see you later.